Good evening. This is our agenda review meeting for May 4th in preparation of the Board of Commissioners commission meeting on Thursday evening. We have all commissioners present plus Mr. Peterson, and we will quickly go through the agenda. Pete, we'll just kind of turn it over to you. I know there's not a whole lot up front. It's mainly the consent agenda.
Namely, the consent agenda, you've got two planning issues. Just running through this quickly. You've got a beer license. Everything's in good order there. Recommendation is for approval. You've got a matter on the consent agenda from Transit. What this is you were giving us permission to apply for a $2,667,000 grant from the state or from the feds. That would be used strictly for mass transit funds. So we have to have a commission approval before we can make application for the grant. We look for that money to be forthcoming here in the next 2 or 3 months. That's primarily going to be bus replacements is what that money is targeted for. We're amending the emergency shelter grant budget. There was an additional $7,500 sent to us as a result of the COVID-19 relief. There are currently 3 recipients, Frontier Health, Salvation Army, and the Manna House, and the recommendation is to split that equally amongst the 3 of them. They would each get an additional $2,500.
Pete,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Can we go back to the transit thing? I had a question.
Sure.
If we do get, first of all, what are the chances we'll get that money if you think it's pretty good? And will that offset some of our capital money that we have earmarked for those replacements that may free up that money for other purposes then?
The likelihood of getting the money is probably 95%. And no, it really doesn't free up any money. This is aimed at bus replacement, and most of those bus replacements are 80 or 90% federal money anyway. This will be 100% federal money with no matching grant required. But there's also something in this letter that says if you're going to use this money instead of a previous allocation, the previous allocation comes back to TDOT. So I don't think it's going to free up any money. If it does, it's not going to be a great deal of money.
Would it free up our match?
It could. I'll need to double check on that. I'm not sure what happens when you have to send, if we get in a position of sending those federal monies back. The match on equipment's usually only 5%. So $130,000 maybe. Anything else on that?
No, that's good. Thanks.
Okay. Emergency shelter grant, we talked about. The annual grant for the seniors through the Area Agency on Aging. That is the annual funding for that is coming up. And what you have before you this week is there's an increase in the grant funding of $2,600. What's in your packet will amend the existing year's grant and allocate an additional $2,600 to us. The health insurance stop loss renewals on your agenda. You're going to see a decrease of about $14,000 in costs to us for next year. So we got a good renewal rate. And what this does is, in our cases that exceed $350,000, the stop loss obviously picks up and carries on the payment of those beyond those amounts.
What is our total premium for that? I didn't see that anywhere. I may have just overlooked it, but
it is $387,879 is the annual stop loss cost.
I guess one of the things I was thinking as we talked about this last time, if we think that the cost of healthcare may be spread out among all users because of the great cost right now going with virus, could we see then our claims costs going up, and we may hit the stop loss value sooner than, or we may have more frequency of them, simply not because much anything has changed. It's just the cost of healthcare has gone up so much that if we stick with this amount, the 350, could we see 6 hit that number versus the 3 that we had? I'm just kind of curious as to, have we done any, scenarios to say, well, maybe we need to change the amount?
If that were your concern, you would probably want to move the amount down.
Yeah.
Which would drive our premium up.
Or I just don't have any information to even understand how much. I mean, is it worth the risk of a higher premium so we get better coverage if we think the risk may be higher on the other end?
Let me get Steve to send you that information tomorrow. Okay.
I don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm just saying we're at the point in time where we're renewing the stop loss. And I know over the years there's been a lot of discussion about what that level should be. Anyway, just some thought.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. You've got the next item is a closing out a contract, a change order number 1, and that's a final balancing change order. What that does is authorizes final payment of $52,500. It executes change order number 1, which decreases the contract amount by $32,823. So the change order is actually a change order credit for costs not incurred. Fire department vehicles, what we're asking to do is we have received 2 fire suppression vehicles and 4 fire prevention vehicle replacements over the last 2 years. And what we're asking here is to declare 4 of these vehicles as surplus. We'll put them on Gov Deals and auction them off and see what kind of money we can get out of them. We no longer need the vehicles, and they're beyond their service life for us.
Pete, we usually have a spreadsheet with that kind of talks about the vehicles. I don't see one with this one. Is that something that will appear in the packet before Thursday, or?
I'll get it to you tomorrow.
Not going to get any more. Okay.
Perhaps we could just isolate items where we have questions. We've all read the packet, so a lot of this is redundant.
Okay. All right. Has anybody got any questions on anything?
I got a question on the proposals. The alarm monitoring maintenance service contract did I read that correctly? There's a built-in increase over the life of the contract? Pete?
Let me pull that up, Commissioner, just a second here.
631.
That is monitoring for schools. 3-year contract, renewable annually, price is firm and can be extended for up to 5 years. The increase that you're seeing is the increase from the existing contract to the proposed contract. And it's gone up $20,000 a year. And part of the reason of that, Commissioner, they have added new facilities and additional alarm points since the contract was done 3 years ago. The expiring contract was done. So they've got additional alarms, additional monitoring, and obviously the inflation factor or profit margin, whatever you want to call it, is included in there as well.
So the 46,716 per year is adjusted by $20,000 per year increase. So it went from 26 to 46.
That's the way I'm reading this. Yes, sir.
This seems like a pretty big jump for year to year, but I guess if it's tied to increased places that they're monitoring, I understand it. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't like a, 20%, 30% increase built in every year for 3 years or something.
Okay, let me get the number of new monitoring locations.
Okay.
And we'll get this up.
The other question I had was right under it on 632, the new software contract. Is that a replacement?
It is the software we're currently using is called Firehouse, and it doesn't allow us to use our electronics out in the field very well.
Okay.
It's become very problematic, and it's an old software that we've used, gosh, probably longer than a decade. This is a new vendor that allows us to do things like take an iPad, and we can pull the guys can pull up like a building plan or a pre-plan en route to a call for service, and they can pull that up on their iPad so they know what the building is, what it looks like, floor plan, those types of things. Whereas with the current Firehouse software, we can't do that. This is a really good enhancement for usability and safety of the fire responders.
Okay, thank you. That's all I've got.
Okay, let's move on to the first reading ordinances. I have a question on the second one, Pete.
Okay.
Ballard, the property for Ballard is on the north side of Christian Church Road. Is that correct? I guess kind of northeast side.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did they request the B4 zoning, or is this a piece of property we're going out and trying to make it compatible in that area to B4?
They were requesting a zoning change.
Okay. Did they have a purpose for that, or did they just think it would be a much more competitive piece of property?
They have a planned use for that they're not willing to disclose right now.
Okay.
I've been told what it is, but I've been asked not to repeat it until they get some contracts signed. It will be a use that will not be offensive to anybody. It's going to be primarily an office type use.
Okay. And Commissioner Calhoun, I think you were going to give us a little update on the Planning Commission this week.
Right. I mean, as I mentioned to some of you, it was a very lengthy Planning Commission, 2 issues that will probably eventually wind up at City Commission. One was an annexation from a request, an individual's request. So that one will probably come back. The Planning Commission voted not in favor of the annexation because it's just one parcel of land, but there's a lot of other details around that. So you're probably going to hear about that. But the big issue is in the Boones Creek area, 19 acres in the same area where we had the request for just a 2-acre lot, if you will, that was turned down. The developer representing the owner has come back with a much larger parcel of 19 acres. A lot of discussion about what is it going to be used for, et cetera. And unfortunately with the Zoom, all we could do was read the emails of people who were either for or against, and obviously most were against for similar reasons than they were against the 2 acre request months back. After a lot of discussion, the motion to approve failed. And then a second motion to meet with a developer to ask the developer about what intent there was to use the land, what it was going to be used for. And I think the request, if I'm remembering correctly, was for B4 zoning. So I only bring it up because obviously it's not going to come to us for a while because they're going to have a meeting with a subgroup of the Planning Commission with the developer. But I'm certain that we're all going to hear comments from the Boones Creek community again. Just sort of give you the heads up. There's really nothing to do until it comes to the full commission. Right now, the request was denied, but there was a group of, I think, 4 planning commissioners that are going to meet with the developer for more information.
Will Sunny be party to those conversations?
I don't think that what the intent was, and that might be something that Pete, you could recommend to Preston if you think Sunny ought to be there. It's probably a good idea.
Yes, sir.
I guess without further conversation about it, that's a little bit of a different wrinkle to have a subset of the Planning Commission meeting with a developer. And I guess, Pete, I would just ask that you dial in to make sure we aren't getting into territory you would be uncomfortable with.
Yes, sir. Will do. As long as it's a properly advertised meeting and it's open to the public, and that's going to be the biggest thing that we must ensure takes place. And Preston and I talked a little bit about this the other day. This is a request for annexation and an assignment of a land use zoning designation. It has nothing to do with approving a proposed use. Is annexation appropriate? Yes or no? And is B4 zoning or whatever zoning they're asking for appropriate? Yes or no? Because a developer could come in and say, I'm going to build a widget shop and turn around and sell it. And the next person comes in and puts in a veterinarian clinic, a
car lot.
a permitted use.
Yeah,
They're going to put in a
any
different permitted use. Let's put it that way. And you have to approve it because the zoning's in place. You can't tie a specific use to an application of a zoning designation. So hopefully everyone will understand that those are the 2 basic tenets before them, and that's what they're being asked to consider. And you'll get a recommendation here in a month or so, and City Commission can make a good decision with it.
That's pretty much all I had, Mayor. It was a fairly long meeting on those two issues.
Yeah, Pete, that's why I asked about Ballad, that if they weren't asked what their use was going to be, and this is the property just across the street, basically, from that.
It is.
And the Planning Commission denied it based on that. I'm just a little concerned about the procedures here. So I agree with Vice Mayor. Please dig into that and make sure that everybody's got their ducks in a row on this.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. Okay, is there anything else? Thanks for those things. Pete, did you have anything else needed to pass on to
No,
us?
ma'am. Nothing that I'm aware of. I took half a day off today to try to get some stuff caught up. So I came in and was paddling hard to get ready for this.
Right, right.
Everything seemed to be calm and nothing new. Lots of inquiries about what people can and can't do and in terms of social distancing. But other than that, it's been a pretty calm day, I think.
How much longer will be serving in this role, or is that going to be a kind of a permanent assignment? And now that we're trying to at least support the governor's actions, what is his interface now with businesses? I've sent 2 or 3 things, to him and to you to follow up on, and just so we have an understanding how it's going to work going forward.
He will continue in this role until there's no longer an order in place. Hopefully that won't be too much longer, month or 2. But if as long as there's an order in place, we're going to need somebody to coordinate all of this. And he's certainly the person to send any inquiries and complaints to, and he's dealing with them. Alicia and Mitch have been very busy the last couple of weeks making phone calls, and they started a survey today of businesses and industries that they deal with on a regular basis to try to get us some feedback on where those particular businesses are, what's going on, what's been challenging, what they may need help with, what they see their upcoming forecast being. So I'm hopeful to get some results in on that sometime next week, and that'll give us a little better feel for what some of our businesses and industries are looking at.
Just to share one piece of information I got late this morning, the governor meets with the 6 metro health departments and the elected leaders in those jurisdictions. So Mayor Fire and Mayor Schul are always on those calls. And on this morning's call, she said they spent a considerable amount of time on youth sports, and announced that they were putting together some guidelines for youth sports, and we're shooting for May the 23rd or 24th to have a ruling on how to address that. So
Okay.
get
Very
prepared.
good.
Get prepared. I think
Thankfully, we don't do summer sports, so and I think our facilities are pretty good shape. I mean, we've gotten a lot of maintenance caught up and painting and the various things. So it'll probably take us a week or 10 days to get everything set up to meet
right.
the terms of the order and whatnot. But yeah, we should be able to get that up and running pretty quick.
Yeah, well, I think the big thing for us would be travel sports, if they're allowed back again, and then they want to use our facilities, being prepared for that. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, anybody has anything else? Beautiful weather. Thank goodness the rain missed us last night. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
All right, nothing else. We will adjourn. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.